Now that we are done with the discussion of maximum price, let's talk about minimum price. Minimum price is kind of like opposite to maximum price, because whenever the government is feeling that the price is too low, that's where minimum price comes into play. So minimum price is set uh, in a way that it makes the price of a good, the market price of a good, to go up. It is also referred to as price floor or price support, because it's trying to support the poor producers in this case. Hence, we put a minimum price above the market determined price or above the equilibrium in order for it to be effective. If you put a minimum price below equilibrium, it won't be effective. Why? Because this is the minimum you have to charge. Nothing below that, but minimum that you need to charge. And if the equilibrium price is already more than the minimum price, then you don't need to worry about it, because that is not going to be effective. We'll show that in a little while of how it works when it comes to the diagram. But what kind of industries get minimum price? We say minimum price is typically put in industries where the government feels the price is too low. One of the market is agricultural market, where government actually feels that over time farmers are not getting enough income, and in order to protect their income, the government sets these prices in order to make sure that the goods that they're selling remain profitable for them, and the farmers as a result stay in business, do not leave the industry, and as a result of that, the supply of agricultural goods remain strong. Let's look at three purposes of minimum price. The first purpose of minimum price, of course, is that we want to protect producers' income. These are the producers, for example, in agricultural market, where prices have gone down over time, and we know this, that the minimum price can protect farmers' income, because that way solid prices or strong prices can make their income go up. The second could be to encourage the production of certain goods which the government feel is really important. We will soon see when we put a minimum price, there will be a surplus, and that surplus can be used in the future for any future shortage. For example, let's say if Pakistan believe that in the future they require a higher production of sugar, maybe they can put a minimum price in that industry, and that can result in the production of that good to go up in the short run, which can be useful in the long run, because then you can store it whenever there's a future shortage is about to happen. The third could be, sometimes we want to protect certain income groups. For example, we will see minimum price to be very commonly found in labor market or in workers market, where the minimum wage can be used to protect poor workers who have a lower wage due to market forces of demand supply. A good example of this is recently in Pakistan, we saw the government put minimum wage of 25,000 rupees for low income workers in order to protect their income. So these are the three main reasons why you will see minimum price to be put in a market. Now let's look at the demand and supply and how minimum price affects the equilibrium in a market. Let's do an example of sugar market. Let's say government is looking at sugar market and finding that the price of sugar is too low. Uh, let's say this is the demand and supply for sugar, and market price is P naught and quantity is Q naught. If the government finds this price P naught to be too low, they will put a minimum price above equilibrium, the minimum that the farmers can charge. And let's say this price is P min. When you charge this price P min, automatically quantity supplied will go up. Why? Because when the price goes up, now the quantity supplied will be much more encouraging farmers or producers of sugars to produce more sugar. But at the same time, because the price has gone up, quantity demanded has gone down to, for example, Q1. So this means the quantity supplied is now more than quantity demanded, or in other words, we have a problem of a surplus or excess supply. So any price that you put above equilibrium, as we've learned this in a earlier discussion, will lead to market to not clear, which means quantity supplied in this case, let me also write this, quantity supplied to be greater than quantity demanded, or we look at this as a surplus. Now in this case of a surplus, certainly there will be an effect on the consumer surplus and producer surplus. So let's look at that. Let's say this is area 1, 2, and 3. Let's call this area 4. Let's make this as area 5 and 6. What is the consumer surplus before? And the answer to that would be that if you look at before, your equilibrium price is P naught and the quantity is Q naught. So consumer surplus will basically be area under the demand curve above the price, which is going to be 1 plus 2 plus 3. While producer surplus will be area above the supply curve below the price, which is going to be 4 plus 5 plus 6, right? So before the quantity is P naught, the quantity is Q naught, and the price is P naught, we are looking at consumer surplus to be area 1, 2, 3, producer surplus to be area 4, 5, 6. Now, after, guys, what happens after the minimum price? After the minimum price, let's write after the minimum price, now price is P min and the quantity being sold is Q1, right? Because there is a surplus and there is an unsold quantity. Now that would mean my consumer surplus will be only area 1, because if the price is P min, then the area under the demand curve above the price is only area 1. While producer surplus, guys, if you look at this, with the quantity being Q1, will be all this area 2 plus 5 plus 6. So what you can see here is this, that because of the minimum price, the producers who were getting 4, 5, 6 now get 2 plus 5 plus 6, which means 5 and 6 is something which they're already getting, right? It's basically the area 2, which is now being area 4, which is now being replaced with area 2. So if minimum price is actually going to benefit producers, one may argue this, that the only thing that will make that happen will be if area 2 is greater than area 4. If area 2 is greater than area 4, one would argue this, that producers will definitely be better off. And that can only be possible if the price goes up, guys, and the quantity is going down, right? And the only way that can happen if the good is inelastic. Why? Because if the good is inelastic, the price will go up by much more as compared to the quantity. So if area 2 needs to be greater than area 4, one may argue this, that the good must be inelastic. If that is not the case, then area 2 may not be greater than area 4. Then producers as a group may not really benefit. What about consumers? And you can see this, consumers are definitely worse off, because previously they were getting 1 plus 2 plus 3, which means this area was also their surplus, but now they're only left with area 1 as the surplus. So consumer surplus will only be area 1. So consumers are definitely worse off. So if I could write the conclusion here for minimum price, is this, that producers will be better off if area 2 is greater than area 4, while consumers are not better off, they will be worse off. So other than making consumers worse off, there are many other problems of minimum price which we would like to discuss. The first problem it results in is that it causes what we call a surplus. As you can see from the diagram, the surplus here is Q2 minus Q1. Now, how does the government deal with the surplus? Because now when you have a surplus or unsold stock, producers will be very worried. So one of the ways the government could deal with the surplus is simply the government could buy the surplus and it could store it. If they do so, that's good news for producer, because suddenly, if I go back to the diagram, if the government is buying all this surplus, then all this region, which is Q2 minus Q1 times your P min, let me just shade this region, all this will be the additional income to the producers. Why? Because now the producers are getting higher income. So now the income that the producers will get will be increased by, because they were already getting P min times Q1, they were already getting this area because that was what consumers were buying, but now it's going to be P min times Q2 as the total income. So that will be good news. So when the government buys this surplus, of course, the producers will be getting a higher income, but the government has to have a plan as to what to do with it. Should they store it for future, or if they don't have a way to deal with it, should they destroy it? Because many countries, when they store too much, they end up destroying it. Or even if they have an option, they sell it abroad in other markets, in foreign markets. So these are the few ways the government could deal with this surplus, uh, which is simply to store it, to destroy it, to sell it abroad in the other market. Another way they can go about is this, that the government could artificially lower supply by restricting producers to a particular quota. So let me explain that again, going back to the diagram. If you look at this diagram, guys, if the government decides to make this as the mandatory quantity, like they say, to not exceed beyond Q1. So this becomes kind of like a quota, right? If they do so, when they put a quota like this, then now they are restricting quantity. So everyone is given a particular quantity and they're told, we're giving you better prices, but we want you to make sure you don't exceed your quantity. Don't get excited basically when the price goes up. Do not overproduce. So that's the second option which you can do, which is put a quota so that you are able to restrict the supply. So the government, when they do so, they offer you a better price, but at the same time, they tell you that we're not going to buy your extra supplies, so never produce beyond Q1. So they are restricting supply, or putting what we call a quota. The third is simply the government can do something to raise the demand of the good. Now, how can government raise the demand of the good? Well, government can raise the demand of the good by helping the firm in terms of advertising, in terms of finding alternatives, in terms of reducing the consumption of like imported goods. Let's say if it's sugar, and let's say there's sugar also imported in the market, you basically ban that import of sugar so that the domestic market only has domestic producer. So if you see that in terms of a diagram, again, the shortage was equal to this much. The government basically makes the demand to go up to here. If the government can make that demand to go up by providing alternative sort of uses, like for example, you know telling people that you can use sugar for different uses, or by, for example, reducing consumption of imported goods, and you can encourage that demand to happen. That will be one way to also make sure that the surplus is no longer there. So these are the few ways, guys, the government can deal with the surplus. Now let's talk about the downside of it from the firm's perspective when they are getting the minimum price for too long. So firms, one may argue, can become inefficient as they may not feel the need to find efficient methods because they are protected with a comfortable minimum price, and as a result they may not cut their costs because the margins are strong, and that could become a problem because now we have inefficiency in farmers or in producers who are protected by a guaranteed price. Lastly, government expenditure may also increase because now the government is buying this surplus, and that would mean either they will cut down on spending in other areas, or if they're not doing so, taxpayers will be eventually bearing this burden of the expensive policy, and that could be also a problem in terms of fairness. So to conclude, while minimum price is a good idea because it protects the one group, which is producers who have low prices, it is not so good for consumers, and also it has these issues of surplus and the market not clearing properly, and therefore the government has to buy the surplus and therefore store it or do something about it, which would mean it will be an expensive proposition.